Hello and welcome to our weekly vlog. I'm Abby and today I am joined by one of my all-time favourite Kevin Mayhew authors, John Cox. Thanks for joining us, John. John, I've known John quite a long time, so I think I'm probably allowed to say that he's one of my favourite Kevin Mayhew authors. He does some other projects with us as well, so I think I can probably get away with saying that. John is here today to talk about his brilliant new book, Pandemic Reflections, which is officially out now. Congratulations, it looks amazing.
Thank you.
Could you give us just a very quick overview of what the book's about?
Well, it's some reflections on thoughts on the pandemic. I was thinking about what was the experience like going through the pandemic. This was last year in March, almost as it started. And I thought, well, how do I shape that? So I thought, well, if I took the alphabet and had a few topics on each letter and did some reflections, their thoughts, they vary a bit, inevitably, because there was so much of variety in the experience. So there's a bit about things like anxiety, about the NHS and so on. And then to say, well, where do we find God in all this, if at all? So there's a bit at the end of each section which just says, well, what does this mean for us, for people of faith, to say? Because I think for some people it raised real questions. What on earth was going on? And there was such a variation. I mean, right from this is God punishing us and it's an evil virus, to if you sit in a church you'll never get COVID. I mean, there was a lot of rubbish being talked, and I wanted to see if I could think through that a bit. People won't agree necessarily with everything I say, but that's fair enough, as long as they begin to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And is it a read from start to finish, or can you dip in at any?
I think that would be indigestible to try reading it. No, it's much more a dip-in book. Look at a topic that sort of interests you to start with and see how it feels. And as I say, it's not there in order to make you agree with me, but rather to say, well, this is how I felt. How do you feel? Which is actually, I mean, it sounds pretentious, but that's what Jesus did with most of his teaching. He didn't say, you've got to believe this. He said, here's a situation. Now, what do you make of that? That's what I was trying to do.
So obviously the subtitle of the book references the year that changed the world, and it's been a year now since lockdown officially started. Obviously the book talks about the lessons that we can learn during lockdown and how we can use those going forward. Did you ever think that we'd still be here a year later, and what have you personally learned from lockdown?
I think I hoped we wouldn't be here at a year's time. I think one of the things was one just didn't know, and it was the not knowing which made things a bit difficult, certainly in the early days and until the vaccines were produced. What have I learned? A bit of patience, and I think, not wanting a quick answer, because a lot of people did not know, even the experts did not know what was happening really, and exactly how it would affect individual lives, how it would affect the country, how it would affect the world. And I think one of the lessons to learn is don't jump to conclusions too quickly, especially in some aspects of social media, because it scares people unnecessarily. And the experts won't get it right all the time, and we shouldn't expect them to. They were having to work with something that was new, was different, and by and large, I think the scientists have done a superb job. I mean, especially to get the vaccines out as they have.
Yeah. So I believe when you first came to work with Kevin Mayhew, it was just for one book. You're now over 30 books in. Do you have a process when you write? Do you sit down and do something specific, or?
Well, the process used to begin with Kevin saying, how about? And then suggesting another book. It depends a little bit. If the book is a general one, it will depend what it's emerged from. I've written some books on educational issues. And that came out of the experience of being a governor and being a director of education for the diocese. Other ones come because they're like the Lent courses or the Advent courses. They're specific to a time. And a course is really, the process is thinking, well, what would be a suitable subject for a 5-week, a 4-week course? What would I want to sort of get out of it? And then it's a matter of deciding usually on a subject, and then just getting down to it. Sometimes doing a bit of background research, and usually, given especially during the lockdown, you've got lots of time. But I mean, the best way is really to give a bit of it time each day, and just keep going and work at it. Sometimes I used to get it checked, but when my brother was alive, I used to send him chapters and say, what do you think? And then rewrite it.
Would he rewrite it, or would he just say...
No, he'd just say, hey, what about?
Do you have a favourite kind of book to write, or do you like kind of the variety?
No, not really. One of the books that I really liked, and unfortunately never did very well, was a book in which I took characters from the Bible and imagined situations around what they were doing and tried to draw upon what the Bible story was saying. That never really took off, but I quite enjoyed doing that. I mean, it was like writing little stories for each character.
So who would you say the book's aimed at, in your opinion, and what would you hope that a reader would get from it?
I have in mind usually a general reader, someone who's not a theologian or an expert in any of the topics that I suggest, but somebody who has an interest in whatever it is. So not an expert, but somebody who probably is happy to reflect a bit on what they're reading and their own views. Clearly a lot of it has a Christian context, so but it's not denominationally precise. It's for a general Christian, as it were. Hopefully so other people of other faiths could also gain something from it, knowing that it comes from a Christian background. And always I try to be clear that at the end of the day, this is based on the way I see faith, and that may not be the way everybody sees it, and so they have to take that into account. I'm not trying to beat my views into them.
So the second part of the question was, and what do you hope the reader can gain from it?
Well, with a bit of luck, a bit of insight, some ideas to set them thinking. That's really what I want to do, is to encourage myself and others to share in ideas and to be open to ideas that they might not have thought of before. I think the need for open-mindedness, especially at this time, is very important.
Yeah. And could you use it sort of individually, or you could sort of have like a Zoom meeting and you could use it as a resource within sort of a home group situation, or is it more of a personal reflection?
You could use it in a group. I think it probably is more, this particular book is more of a personal, individual. The courses that I write could be either, and they're intended to be usually for groups, but always say, if you're on your own,
you can still do this.
Work this, yeah.
I understand there's a bit in the book that talks about technology and Zoom, and I know for you personally that's sort of been quite a big thing in this lockdown. Is that sort of an important lesson you've learned, or something you feel? Well,
I'm elderly, and I think a lot of older people have discovered that actually they can use this sort of technology. In the past they only thought it was the grandchildren who could do it, but a lot of people have found that they can Zoom or FaceTime or any of these systems in order to keep in touch, and I think that's great. And churches have had to discover how they can use technology for online streaming of services, and I think some of those lessons will be carried on after the pandemic. I think work, for example, I think there'll be a lot more meetings conducted by Zoom or whatever in the future. Not all of them, I hope, because we need to be in touch with each other, but I don't think there'll be people flying all over the world in the way that they used to, and to some extent that's a good thing.
I think it's made everything a lot more accessible, hasn't it? People have realised that they don't have to, they can attend things or do things that they thought perhaps they couldn't with technology.
Absolutely.
So finally, this is my favourite on-the-spot question. If you had to describe your lockdown experience in 3 words, what would they be?
I think patience, because I think there are times I've got impatient with the whole process and frustrated by it and wanted it to move on. And the danger of wanting it to move on is that you think about yourself. You don't think about what you do might have an effect upon others. Yeah. So I think a bit of patience was necessary. I think relationships, it's made me, and I think it's made lots of people realise that actually relationships are very important. And that although the technology has made it possible for people to see each other virtually and so on, actually we know that's not enough. We actually need to be with each other. Yeah. You need to look into the eyes, you need to hug and all that. So relationships, really important. And I would hope that will be a lesson that we'll all learn and keep, because it spreads out. Wider, it means community. And I think there have been some lessons learned about community, about the need to work. I've only got one other word, and yeah. I think gratitude. I think at our best we've learnt to be exceedingly grateful for the NHS, for carers, for just people down the street who've taken the trouble to pop in and say, can I get your groceries for you? And I think gratitude is a very important quality to have. If we can't be grateful, then we become very selfish. There have been signs of selfishness, I think, during this, but I think it's important to think of the positives, and I think in doing that, it's very good to be really grateful.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited about the new book, and if you want to get your hands on a copy, it is available from kevinmayhew.com and all good book and online retailers. Thanks, John.